qui a Ferrara con Maryam al-Khawaja, la figlia di uno dei leader dell'opposizione in Bahrain, e leader anche nella lotta per i diritti umani, e sorella di Zeinab, conosciuta anche come Angry Rabia nella blogosfera, famosa appunto per la lotta che conducono contro il regime. Miriam è qui perché lei vive a Copenaghen e quindi ha una testimonianza diversa dalle altre. First of all, I would like to commend you the recent event, because we know in these days that Bahrain started again to appear in some websites for what is going on inside the country. I mean, there was the case of the doctors who were finally judged as guilty. And so, can you explain what is going on? There are other protests in these days at the moment. Yeah. What is going on?
Well, I mean, the protests never stopped since last year, February 14, 2011. The protests still happen almost every single day. What has changed, though, and I think this is very important, what has changed is the idea of how the Bahraini regime, the confidence they have about themselves. And I feel that now they feel like they have international immunity. They feel like no matter what they do, they're not going to actually have to face consequences for their actions. And so this allows them to do a lot of things that last year, for example, they would have been more careful about. So for example, upholding the verdicts of the Bahrain 13, the political and human rights leaders, upholding and rearresting some of the doctors, going after the most prominent human rights defenders. These are things that they weren't even doing last year, some of these things. They weren't even doing last year. Now they're doing because they know that even when there are statements, it doesn't mean that there's going to be consequences.
And I mean, among these names there is the name of your father, for example, that was arrested and was tortured inside the jail. And before he was living in Copenhagen, I think.
Yes.
Okay. Like in exile. And then when he came back, he was arrested, and he was one of the symbol of this revolt, at least, and your sister as well. So my question is, how do you feel to be the only one in the family that you can come here and you can speak freely, in a free way, I mean?
Well, I mean, of course, the reason that I'm free is because I'm not in Bahrain. If I was in Bahrain, I'd probably be in their same situation. I'd probably be in prison or otherwise. It's difficult, of course, but then again, what my family is going through is what hundreds and hundreds of other families are going through as well. And we're actually, in some cases, we have it better than other people. You have other families where some of their kids have been shot and killed. At least that hasn't happened in my family. So I feel like, as difficult as it is to see what my family is going through, it's part of the process. It's part of the price that we have to pay for demanding justice and freedom and human rights.
Aren't you afraid?
It's not. A lot of these protests are not. It's not the absence of fear. Everyone has fear. We know what these governments or these regimes are capable of. So of course, fear is always going to be there. It's the idea that you overcome your fear. It's the idea that you push aside your fear and you do everything despite being afraid. I think that's really what's going on. It's not that people are not afraid anymore. They're still afraid. It's just that they choose to go past that fear.
And I mean, Bahrain is a Shia country. And there are those who said that the demonstrator takes order from Tehran. And at the same time, Bahrain is governed by the Sunni family who have support from Saudi Arabia. How important is this composition? And do you think that the Bahrain case show the evolution of the axis that we see in the Arab Springs between Sunni and Shia, or not?
I think, first of all, I wouldn't say that Bahrain is a Shia country. Bahrain is Bahraini. It's for everyone. And when the protest happened, it was also for everyone. It was for Sunnis, Shias, people who don't consider themselves Muslims, whoever. What happens in every oppressive country is that the government or the regime tries to split people up according to sex or religion so that they can control them. And so in Egypt, they tried to convince the world that it was Muslims against Copts. In Syria, they're trying to convince people that it's Alawites versus Sunnis, but that's not the case. The case is that it's an oppressive regime against its people. No matter what their religion or sect is. Are they trying to turn it into a sectarian issue? Yes, they are, of course, for their own benefit. But is that really what's going on? No, it's not. At the end of the day in Bahrain, if you're Sunni and you criticize the government, you're in prison and you're tortured for it. And if you're Shia and you defend the government, you could be a minister, you could be in government, you can have a very good position. So it really isn't about whether you're Sunni or Shia, it's about whether you criticize the government or not.
But I mean, at the beginning you were speaking about the international community, and we know that the EU has an important base, naval base in Bahrain.
Yes.
And US officials have called for the release of important activists such as your father, but this will basically did not alert the situation or the state, the regime.
Yeah.
So, do you think that America is a kind of reticent power, and which is the consequence?
No, I think that the United States and the EU, if they decided to stop supporting regimes like Bahrain, those regimes will not last very long. The reason that they're actually able to stay in power is because they receive support from other countries. The fact that the US and the UK and other countries are still selling arms to Bahrain when there are massive, widespread human rights violations, it's disgusting to say the least. And these are countries that come out every day and speak about human rights and democracy and how important they are. They criticize Russia for doing the same thing in Syria when they're doing it to Bahrain. So I don't think that it's because they don't have any leverage. Last year, if the US or the UK made a statement about a certain issue, it gets resolved very quickly. Now that doesn't happen anymore, because now the Bahraini regime understands that even if the US or the UK make a statement, they're not actually going to impose economic sanctions, they're not actually going to stop selling them arms, so they have no incentive to change.
And I mean, we saw Bahrain just when we as media, we watched Bahrain just when there is the Grand Prix, the Formula One. So, do you think, first of all, that Bahrain is a country forgotten by the media? And do you think that why, activists, demonstrators want to capture international attention during this worldwide event?
Yeah. Well, I think, that Bahrain is an inconvenient revolution. It's inconvenient to the Middle East, it's inconvenient to the West, it's inconvenient to a lot of people. And given the kind of influence that Saudi Arabia and Bahrain have internationally, of course they can influence things like the media. We do see coverage, but not quite what it should be. I think it was interesting, Amber Lyon, just a few weeks ago, actually exposed CNN for not covering, on purpose not covering Bahrain the way it should be covered. And I think that this really shows, one aspect of why Bahrain is not being covered, is this influence by the PR companies and by Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and their influences. So I don't think that it's something that's happening by mistake. I don't think it's something that is a coincidence that's going on.
And according to a MasterCard research, I found that the Bahrain women are the most powerful of the whole countries of the Gulf. And MasterCard assesses the level of education, opportunities, professional and political participation of women in 6 countries of the Gulf region. So, can you confirm? And which role female women played in the revolt? Because we were used to see picture of women on the right side and men on the left side, or the opposite. So which is the role?
Well, I think it's 2 issues, right? First of all, I think that women not only played an important role in the protest, they helped lead the protests. So I don't think that this is a separation. Why is it always when we're talking about protests, we separate whether women took a role or not, as if it's something unusual. It's not unusual. They're part of the society and part of the population. Of course they take part in it. What I think is important to distinguish, though, is this idea of, because the women and men are separated, they must be oppressed. There's something going on there. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's just more comfortable not to be stuck in between 2 men. It makes sense. So I feel like one of the things that needs to happen with the Arab Spring is the breaking of stereotypes that exist in the West. And that's why one of my favorite videos that came out of the so-called Arab Spring was a video from Bahrain, a woman wearing an abaya and a scarf, which usually is a sign of oppression here in the West, or that she's being controlled. She comes out and she starts spraying graffiti on the wall, and when she's done it says, even if the men stop, the women will continue. And I think this is important because not only does it show the role that women play in the protest, but it also breaks a lot of Western stereotypes that exist about what women are in the Middle East and North Africa region.
Okay, we thank you a lot, and we hope you and your family can go on and continue her.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Thanks a lot.